The Connecticut Darwin Day Dinner Science Quiz has been a popular activity since the first of these annual events was held in 2008. The quiz covers a wide variety of scientific subjects, including events in Charles Darwin's life, evolution, astronomy, chemistry, and so much more. This video provides a discussion of the quiz answers from the 2026 Darwin Day Dinner. Mitch Kalmus, leader of the quiz team, which also includes Natalia Castelo, Branco, Matos, and Patel, presents the answers. In this video, each question is presented and then a discussion of the answer follows. It is recommended that you pause the video as each question is presented and try to answer the question yourself. You may then continue the video to learn more about the answer. The link to the full question document is given in the description below the video in YouTube.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Humanism Today, the podcast where we dive into ideas, stories, and conversations that inspire humanist freethinkers and like-minded people. This podcast is presented by the Humanists and Freethinkers of Fairfield County in Connecticut. Our motto is compassion and reason. Compassion means that we care about all people and their rights regardless of their status in society or their personal condition. Reason means that we use science, facts, logic, and scientific methods to find the truth.
I'm going to go over the answers. I am not going to read all the choices. I'm not going to read the questions because we'll be here much longer. So just pause the video when I get to the question. Okay. And I'm going to spend more time on some questions than others. So when I get started, if I spend a lot of time on the first two questions, don't think we're going to be here all night. So some will go fast. Okay? So you ready to be humiliated? Okay. Jane Goodall, just an immense legacy she has. And I was one of the millions of people that had my life completely changed by watching her documentary, Among the Wild Chimpanzees. Literally made me cry. And I was never the same after that. Because it was the first time I saw a chimpanzee and really looked at it. And looked at, the consciousness there, And to see in this movie what they do. They hug, they kiss, they get angry. She was a giant in science. And Darwin is my hero, my number one hero, Jane Goodall, right up there. And she said it about Darwin herself, that Darwin was her hero. She did read some Darwin as a child in this book, The Miracle of Life, but she was more interested in Tarzan and Dr. Dolittle. Those two books really influenced her to get out into the wild. I got the opportunity to meet Jane, thinking about 10 years ago when she was at WestCon. And just a quick story, I was in line to, have her sign her book. And I was with my son, who was 16 at the time. And we're online and we're getting closer. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm going to get to meet my hero, And somehow I was in this intense conversation with my son and we drifted out of the line, right? So by the time I noticed, the people that were behind us were talking to her already. And I freaked. I said, oh, sorry, excuse me, we were next. And Jane Goodall looks up and says, patience, young man. Have some patience. So my hero admonished me for being impatient, but she was so nice, and I got to tell her that she was the reason why I became a biology teacher. I will never forget that. This is a chimpanzee that they were transporting. She was talking to it when it was in the cage, and she had never met that chimp before, and you could see how much it appreciated her calming it and talking to it. So, to get to the question, I have to say I was really surprised. I thought everyone was going to get this right, and not everyone got it right. So here's what she discovered. This is Dr. Graybeard. She named him. And look at what he's doing. They call it termite fishing. So the answer was they make and use tools. Okay? This was a huge thing because up until this moment, humanity thought that humans were the only species that made and used tools, right? And boy, were we wrong. We were wrong. After this, all the great apes make and use tools. All of them, right? Orangutans, gorillas, the bonobos. Birds make and use tools, right? Here's a bird that not only makes the tool, but forms it into the shape of a hook. That bird on the lower right-hand corner is in captivity, but it's using this hook to lift this weight out of this tube to get to food in here. So they are pretty smart. These animals use rocks to break open shells or nuts. And these elephants are scratching themselves with their tool. Even a cow recently was discovered using a broom, and it uses opposite sides of the broom, the handle, the brush, depending on what part of its body it wants to scratch. So, and there are animals that use other animals or the products of other animals as tools. My favorite example is this bird, this crow in Japan, that puts its nuts in an intersection and then waits for the cars to run over the nuts and break open their nuts, right? So they're using us as tools. So again, my two heroes, and this first question got me thinking about the second question. What did Darwin know about the existence of the great apes? Did he ever encounter them, right? And I didn't know the answer. You know, I mean, people think I'm so smart because I make the quiz up. I just have a question, then I try to find the answer out. It's not because I'm, so smart. I don't know everything. So before we get to this answer, though, this last choice, observed AI-generated videos of gorillas on TikTok. I don't know if you've seen this, but once you click on one, you will see them every day for the rest of your life, right? Every day. They will show up in your feed, right? So here's a gorilla fake, wrestling with a grizzly bear. Here's a gorilla and a lion. Here's a lion and a pit bull. Here's a gorilla arm wrestling. Here's a gorilla boxing. It's just, this is not good. It's not, okay? Yes, it's entertainment, right? And yes, it's, it's funny, whatever. But when I was a teacher, my job was to go in and wake kids up at 7:30 in the morning, right? And get them to look at something and say, wow, that's cool. So how are they going to do that when they're being bombarded by all this fake stuff, right? I'm concerned about that. So this is not AI. That's Coco the gorilla, right? That knew like hundreds of signs in American Sign Language, right? Fake AI or real? Look at what that chimpanzee is doing. I may have shown you this a few years ago. I don't remember, but so that's not AI. That's real. And those chimpanzees were able to do that more accurately than college students. Seriously, they were. I mean, here's the link if you don't believe me. So it really got me thinking, how is AI going to affect the next generation of kids, right? If they're being bombarded with misinformation. So I decided to ask AI. I asked AI, and here's what AI said. AI videos will significantly impact children's reality perception by blurring lines between real and fake, fostering potential attachments to synthetic characters and creating a flood of persuasive misinformation, potentially hindering critical thinking and empathy development, right? Something we really need, all of us, while raising major privacy concerns as its realism becomes indistinguishable from human-created content. Children are especially vulnerable to mis- and disinformation, making it harder to develop robust reality-checking skills, potentially leading to confusion and altered social understanding. So I'm sorry to be a downer. I just had to say this because this could be the last time I ever get up in front of intelligent people and talk. Okay? Huh?
Which AI did you use?
Google. Just whatever Google AI. Okay, so the answer is he went to a zoo in England and met an orangutan. I thought it would have been on his journey, his voyage, but no. So, and there was a movie made that depicts this. It's called Creation. I've never seen it, but it is on Amazon. It's still available. So he went to the zoo to see this orangutan, the first time he ever saw an ape, and he witnessed the orangutan have a temper tantrum because the zookeeper held out an apple, and she wanted it, and she freaked out and was impatient, and the zookeeper said, "Jenny, if you calm down, I'll give you the apple." And what did Jenny do? She tried, couldn't do it, tried, couldn't do it, and then she calmed down, and he gave her the apple. So Darwin was very impressed. He also witnessed Jenny looking in the mirror and looking in her mouth, which is an indication that, she knew it was a reflection of her, not like when cats try to attack the mirror. And that was way before the mirror test was invented. So it really made a profound impression on him. He came to that conclusion that the differences between humans and animals are a matter of degree, not kind, right? It's just a matter of how much, not kind. All right, so next question, DMS, dimethyl sulfide. This time we're going to get to the answer right away. So you would have to remember from high school a methyl group, right? Methyl group is CH3. So dimethyl is two methyl groups. Here's the structural formula. And if you add up all those atoms, it is choice B, C2H66, H6S. Okay? So this I wanted to spend a little time on because this is an example of how science really works, right? So here we have a planet orbiting a star 120 light years away. How in the world do we know what's in that planet's atmosphere? Interesting question, right? How do they know? Okay, so when a planet gets in front of its star, it blocks some of the light from the star, and we can measure that dip in the brightness from the James Webb Space Telescope. And they can also see which wavelengths are being dimmed or blocked. And they are being blocked because they're being absorbed by the planet's atmosphere, certain wavelengths, right? And certain molecules absorb certain wavelengths of light, okay? So from the wavelengths that are not getting through, we can determine which molecules are in the atmosphere. So the James Webb Space Telescope has an instrument on it that functions like a prism, and it splits the light up into its component wavelengths. And we could compare what those wavelengths are when the planet is in front of the star versus when it's not in front of the star. And by subtracting those wavelengths, we can figure out which wavelengths are being absorbed by the planet's atmosphere. So when they did this, and this is multiple instruments taking these measurements, they found methane, carbon dioxide, and dimethyl sulfide. So why is dimethyl sulfide such a big deal? Because up until this point in 2023, the only source of dimethyl sulfide was living things, right? Phytoplankton in the ocean. So in 2023, they detected it, but they were only 68% confident that that was really being detected and it wasn't a mistake by the instrument, okay? And then they redid it because 32% chance of being wrong is not good, right? It's not good. So they redid it with a different instrument, and they got a 3 sigma result, 99.7% confident. That means that there's a 0.3% chance that it was something wrong with the instrument, right? Or just a chance detection. And you would think that's it, but not so fast. Because for them to make a major announcement that we have discovered the signal that tells us there's life on another planet, they better be sure. So they're waiting, they're still taking more measurements, and they're waiting for this. 6/100,000ths of a percent chance that it's a mistake, right? So they have not gotten there yet, okay? But there's more. And this was in your question. If you remember, there was a Darwin dinner a while back where we talked about this mission to a comet. It took 10 years to get to this comet. And they landed on it right there, and they took samples, and they analyzed those samples again in 2024, and what did they find? Dimethyl sulfide. So this is suggesting it may be produced abiotically without life being involved. And then they synthesized it in the lab in 2024. They were simulating early Earth conditions and synthesized it. So again, it could be coming from an abiotic source, and they detected it in interstellar space. So is there a chance? There's still a chance, right? But now we're at the point where we not only have to show that it's there, we have to also show that it's not being made by other processes other than life, other than living things. Okay, so plasma. A lot of people, I think, got this one right. What is it? It is D, a superheated gas consisting of free electrons and positive and positive ions. Okay, and this, is anyone here from the Science Readers Group? Anyone else in the Science Readers Group? HFFC, right? So they actually addressed this just a few weeks ago, but I wanted to tell you guys that we've had this question for months. We didn't get it, from your meeting. We didn't steal it from you. So what property of neurons does this exploit? So Francis Crick, remember him? Watson and Crick? So in 1999, he hypothesized or theorized, he came up with this idea that someday we could use light to turn neurons on and off in an animal's brain and study its behavior. And just a few years after that, it came into being. So what does this have to do with algae, with protists? When they were studying protists, and this is what we would call basic science, right? They discovered a protein in the membrane that functions as a channel, but that protein is opened by light, by specific wavelengths of light. And that allows the algae to orient itself and direct itself towards light so it could photosynthesize, maximal photosynthesis. So someone had the idea, well, if there's a protein that responds to light and lets in ions into the cell through the membrane, then why don't we take the gene for that protein, put it into a virus, and then infect that virus into an animal? And they did in 2005, so just a few years later. So your answer is B, initiating ionic conductance through neuronal membranes. Protists are single cells, so they don't form synapses with other cells, so that couldn't be an answer, okay? So this is called optogenetics, and again, they're using light to open a channel in a neuron. The ions come in, and that starts your impulse, and then the animal responds accordingly, depending on what neuron it is. So here's an example of a mouse where they have the fiber optic light, into the brain, but only on the right side of the brain. If you remember, the right side controls the left side of the body. So you could see when the light goes on, the mouse starts to move, but it's not just moving, it's going in a circle because it's orienting itself to the left when the right side of the brain is stimulated. And that might seem gratuitous, why are they doing this? But it's a demonstration of what this technology can do. So think about Parkinson's disease, right? Or epilepsy, inappropriate neuron activity. There are channel proteins that will shut off a neuron. So they can use this potentially as treatments for those disorders. So there's lots and lots of applications. They've already demonstrated the ability to reduce anxiety in mice, reduce their fear response, or increase their aggression. They've even partially restored vision in blind patients by giving them one of these channel proteins so that the neurons that have degenerated can be replaced by other neurons that have this now. And it's also very specific. Lots and lots of applications. Next question, the snowball Earth. So here's Hell, right? Did you know there's a town in Norway called Hell? And I think there might be one in Michigan too, and it does freeze over. And here's an artist's depiction of Hell's frozen over. And look who's there. And look who else is there. And look who else is there. Redacted, 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 even in Hell. Thank you for laughing. I wasn't sure if that was going to go over or not. Okay, so it was so cold that glacial ice sheets reached the equator. And there's lots of geological evidence for that. There's a competing hypothesis that it did not, right? And that there were plenty of regions that had melted ice. They call that slush ball Earth. Right now, the scientists are vigorously debating, Okay, thank you for laughing. Okay, so raise your hand if you knew about this one, the interstellar object. Wow. So I thought everyone knew about this, right? Because once you click on it in your news feed every day, you're getting articles on this. So I was just thinking everyone knows about this. Like, I was shocked, right? This is actually the third object that came into our solar system from somewhere else, outside the solar system. So how do they know that it's coming from outside the solar system, right? Well, it's not because of Stephen Miller being appointed. Here he is. It's not. Thank goodness, right? Thank goodness. Okay, and it's not because it's going fast. It is very, very fast, but it's not the fastest object ever recorded in the solar system. That belongs to the Parker Solar Probe. Being fast does help it not get pulled in by the sun's gravity, but that's still not the definitive reason why we know it's coming from outside. It's the trajectory. These are the two first interstellar visitors, and you could see the trajectory is hyperbolic, right? In other words, it's not going to loop back. It's just coming through. So your answer is E, hyperbolic. So here it is in July. So as it passed Mars, it's going to come in right here. We were able to photograph it with the satellites orbiting Mars. And then when it got closer to Earth, we photographed it again. It's going to pass Jupiter in March, and there'll be another opportunity to photograph it if they use the Juno space probe that's orbiting Jupiter. So as I was researching this question, I came across this video of this pretty famous physicist, and I'm watching the video, and he's not moving, and he's being very sensationalist. And I'm sitting there for like 5 minutes. I realized that's not really him. That's AI, right? So if Senator Blumenthal was still here, I would say regulate, right? Regulate AI. Okay, question A. Thank you. So in the deep ocean, complete pitch black, how could you fix carbon if there's no photosynthesis? If you said detritus, it's kind of close, but no, because that's dead stuff, right? And carbon fixation is a chemical reaction, so we need living things to do that. The answer is microbes, okay? And these microbes are able to produce carbohydrates, and they live in an endosymbiotic relationship with worms and mollusks down at the bottom of the ocean. Neanderthals, right? Not sure how many people got this one right, but I was thinking that this might have been easier, but I don't know. So they are not still alive, waiting to reveal themselves. I don't know which one of you guys came up with that, but that was hilarious. That was it's Natalia. Right? So the answer is 40,000 years ago. So there were three groups living in the same environment for thousands of years, right? Neanderthals and these guys, Denisovans, which have not been named formally yet because they have very few fossils. The first species ever discovered just based on DNA, on recovering their DNA. So what happened to them, right? You may want to think about that, right? So the current thought is that it was a perfect storm of conditions, competition with modern humans migrating out of Africa, possibly bringing disease with them that they were not, immune to. Inbreeding, small populations, low genetic diversity. Interbreeding, right? Now we have evidence that there was lots of interbreeding going on between humans, Neanderthals and Denisovans, and humans and Denisovans, So it was a good time. Yeah. And, and climate change, right? So we were never alone, right? When our species was evolving, there were other species there that not only were they there, but we were mating with them. It's just mind-blowing, right? And how do we know this? Well, first I'll get to this. So this linear depiction is completely wrong. We need to get rid of this, get it out of every textbook, and replace it with something like this, which shows it as a tree that, horizontal, they were coexisting at the same time. So it's like a tree or a bush, and this diagram is the bush on its side, right? So this is kind of like the horizontal gene transfer that Dr. Bogarten was talking about before, except it was sex. It was done with sex, right? So lots of sex in that bush. My goodness, did I just say that? Okay, sorry about that. Okay. So all of these things, right, the genetic evidence, right, all of these genes for all these characteristics are in our DNA, right, 2 to 3% if you are not from sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, so we got all of those things from them. Some good things, some bad. So what did they get from us, right? It's a two-way street, exchange of genetic material. 6% of their genome was from human DNA. Their Y chromosome on the males was replaced. Their mitochondrial DNA was replaced. And there's one gene involved in cell division that they got from humans. All of the other genes have eroded. They're like in introns, in between coding sequences. They don't code for proteins. So it's thought that they were not an advantage, so they were selected against. Okay, last question. So this type of engineering, directed evolution, what process does it mimic? You tell me. Come on. Natural selection is correct. Natural selection. Here's what they do. So let's say they are interested in an enzyme, a certain protein that controls chemical reactions, and they want that enzyme to function in, let's say, high temperature, right? So they find bacteria that can survive in hot springs. They get the enzyme, they get the gene for the enzyme, and then they overproduce it with PCR, but they also mutate it as they're reproducing the gene, so that's producing lots of variation, lots of new genes, right, based on that original gene they're interested in. And then they test it to see how hot that enzyme can function, what temperature it can function in. And then they select the organisms that have taken in this gene that are functioning well in high temperature, and they get rid of the other variants. And they start with that gene, and they start over again, go through the whole cycle again. So this is Darwinism in a test tube. Natural selection, we would call it artificial selection. But I think Darwin would really be thrilled if he was around to see that we could show his theory occurring in a test tube. And that's it.
If you like this video, you might like one of our videos above, or one of the other videos or podcasts at hffcct.org. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking the subscribe button above. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep thinking humanistically.